Hey guys, I just want to make a comparison here to the neuroweapon situation and the discovery and really the long path to finding the origin of HIV. And I found this to be interesting, and I think there's a correlation there, or a similarity there, not a correlation, excuse me, in that we believe that HIV seemed to pop up in the 80s, out of nowhere. But given a long enough time, they were able to kind of look back. And I believe I was watching PBS, and they determined that first case of HIV, as with all diseases, jumped from animals to humans, and happened in the early 20th century, 1915, something like that, in Africa. Also very common for these diseases to originate there. Um, and the reason it took so long is because they said, especially going back to before germ theory, someone would die and they just didn't have, especially in Africa, and of course, then it eventually makes its way into, makes its way up the chain, gets into Europe, gets into the Middle East, etc. Makes its way over to North America on a boat, um, decades later. Um, but they didn't have the means. When someone died, they could just do their best to, of course, they had HIV and then developed AIDS and died. But it would just look like a lot of other things. They would be, remember, HIV, you're going to die from you could die from a cold, or some other incidental thing, but because your body couldn't fight it off. So it took them literally, almost 80 years before we started really understanding that these people are not dying from a cold or some secondary cause, that the underlying cause is the human immunodeficiency virus. Um, this reminds me a lot of like neuroweapons and the people who are being attacked, because once it becomes apparent that it's neuroweapons, doctors are going to go back, hopefully with a whole lot of embarrassment and shame that they ignored this problem and shunned the people. They're going to go back and they're going to look through all of the records of people who were reporting neuroweapon symptoms before anyone knew what a neuroweapon was. And typically, this is going to go back into the mid 80s, when the first neuroweapon symptoms appeared, because not coincidentally, as Dr. Robert Duncan and others who are in the know have very clearly stated, these are satellite based weapons. And when the satellite technology was strong enough to be able to do this to the human beings down on the ground, that's when the symptoms started to pop up. Now, only the bravest and smartest and best doctors have picked up on this, and are understanding, how long it's been around, and what it looked like when it started. But the medical industry as a whole, when they finally accept this fact, is going to look back, and it's going to be much like the tracing HIV back, because they're going to go, "Oh my God, how many people died? How many people came in with symptoms at first, and then got sicker and sicker and sicker, and then eventually died, and we just thought it was something else." And that's one of the most sinister parts of what the neural weapons programs are, is to make people look like they died of something else, right? So, over time their health got worse, and doctors go, "Well, I guess it's just this, or I guess you just got that, or I guess that just happens sometimes." They love to say that. "Oh, I guess it just happens sometimes. Well, in that, "I guess it just happens sometimes," you have created a very dangerous void for neuroweapons to be used to attack, sicken, and kill people. Because doctors go, "Oh, I guess that just happens sometimes." No, it doesn't. Yes, it does, but that isn't the explanation for everything. And then they're going to go back, and as I've always said, the exponential rise in illness, uh, starting, of course, after neuroweapons became weaponized, and well known, is of course because of the neuroweapons. And they're maybe not going to be able to say, exactly which case was neuroweapons or not, but they can look at it and they can say, well, 50% of these cases were neuroweapons related. We don't know exactly which person, but we know that the exponential rise in. It's going to be rather embarrassing for them, because it was under their noses the whole time, and it's also going to look bad because they were making money off not identifying what it was. They were making money off, um, treating it, as opposed to getting to the cause. They're making money treating the symptoms, but not finding and identifying the cause. So it's going to be a bit like that, and I've made that another video where I compared neuroweapons. The amount of time it's going to take for us to grasp neuroweapons, much like tuberculosis, where it was happening under our noses the whole time, but we just didn't have the ability. It was pre-germ theory to understand what it was and what was causing it. And then after it was determined, there was a very large, essentially, it was one doctor that figured it out, and every other one didn't believe him. And then slowly, they all came on board as they realized, oh, this is what's causing. One doctor was like, well, it's a microscopic organism that you can't see with the naked eye. People were like, yeah, right, that guy's nuts. And just like today with neuroweapons, anyone that says this has just been vilified, demonized, vilified, you know, uh, just trashed, had their credibility called into question. They're nuts. They don't know what they're talking about. The irony is that the people who are nuts and don't know what they're talking about are the people that are in denial of what's going on, and they will, one by one, over and over, slowly come around, and it's going to take some time, and it's just going to be like with HIV. They're going to have that same, and they're going to look and go, "Oh my God, people were coming to us for help for decades, and we were going, oh, I don't know what to tell you. Here's a pill. Maybe you'll feel better. Maybe you won't. Thanks for the money." It's going to suck for them. Hopefully, they have a little bit of remorse and shame, and maybe we can all learn from this. And that's really what life and human history is, right? You got to make mistakes to learn. It's all. Hopefully, it's a teachable moment. So I just wanted to make that sort of comparison. That analogy there. That's what it's going to be like, and the light bulbs are going to start to go off you know, in the heads of all of the medical community uh, over time, and it'll have sort of this exponential, one and then two, and then once they see that everybody else is accepting it, then more people will be more likely to accept it, and on and on and on, and we will get there. It's just going to take some time, and um, until that happens, there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering from those that are being exposed to neuro weapons and have been. Uh, you know, what's funny, like the Cuban diplomats, I bring this up quite a bit. Like, if you're a Cuban diplomat, it's totally okay to have been attacked with neuro weapons. If you are anyone else, it can't be neuro weapons, and you're insane for bringing it up. Literally, like a doctor would be like, "Oh, this guy brought up neuro. Oh, this guy's nuts. Write it in your file." Like, okay, that's bizarre. So if you're in this group of people, it's totally fine. But anybody else who's had tinnitus and ringing and clicking in their ears and reported that rumbling in their chest, which is the feeling of the energy flowing through them, like the diplomats, and then reported that the symptoms went away when they went outside of structures, just like the diplomats, because that's how neuroweapons work. They require the house, the structure, the wiring and the plumbing to act as a transducer, which is why it goes away when you go outside or greatly decreases. Anybody that says that, they're we don't know what it is. Here's a pill. Good luck. Or worst case scenario, they label them as being crazy. But if you're these 25 people, it's totally okay. They could go to their doctor and say, it was localized in my room and happened most when I slept. If I got up and walked away, it would stop, which is what hundreds of thousands of Americans have been reporting to their doctors for the past 25, 30 years, basically. And has been well documented by the few strong, decent, forward-thinking doctors out there that have taken up this cause. So if you're these 25 people, it's totally fine. If you're anybody else, you're nuts and or making it up. I think that's crazy. Um, just thinking that you're the last, sane person on earth make you crazy. I love iRobot. Will Smith's outstanding in that, but um, when it comes to this one, I will say I told you so, because we're right and they're wrong. It'll take them a while to understand that. So, for those out there that need to be educated on the subject, and for those that are going through it, this will help you give you a better understanding of sort of human psychology and human history, and why we are where we are. So, just my thoughts. Thank you.